I just saw a fireball and then it was just gone.
The deadly mid-air collision in the American capital.
It was a very quick, rapid impact.
The investigation this Thursday night, the recovery efforts in the river, and what we're learning about the victims. The U.S. president doubles down on his tariff threat.
And I'll be putting the tariff of 25% on Canada.
The one Canadian export, he says, may be exempt. The latest exchange of hostages and prisoners between Israel and Hamas, why it was delayed for several hours. And one food bank's fishy windfall.
We didn't want it to go to waste.
The big donation that came with a catch.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. There are no survivors after a mid-air collision in Washington, D.C. A passenger jet and a U.S. military helicopter crashed into each other as the plane with 64 people on board was about to land at Ronald Reagan National Airport Wednesday night. Both aircraft fell into the freezing water of the Potomac River. Crews spent all night and into today searching for survivors without success. Before all the bodies were even recovered, President Trump was speculating on the cause, blaming past presidents for air traffic control hiring standards and diversity and inclusion policies, and he hinted the helicopter pilot may also be to blame. Federal investigators then set the record straight.
We do not know enough facts to be able to rule in or out human factor, mechanical factors. That is part of the NTSB investigative process.
American Airlines Flight 5342 was en route to Washington from Wichita, Kansas, and among those on board were U.S. and Russian figure skaters. We'll have more on that in just a moment. Our Washington Bureau Chief Jackson Proskow begins our coverage at Ronald Reagan National Airport. Jackson.
Donna, as planes take off and land here at Reagan National Airport, they're flying right over the wreckage of those two aircraft, which are still in the water. Investigators say it was a quick, high-impact collision in the sky that sent both aircraft plummeting into the icy river. The wreckage of American Airlines Flight 5342 sits upside down in the icy Potomac River, just meters from the end of the runway. Security cameras captured the moment the Bombardier CRJ-700 jet collided with a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter midair before both aircraft plunged into the water.
I just saw a fireball and then it was just gone, so I haven't seen anything since they hit the river.
The flight, operated by regional airline PSA, was on final approach and about to land.
This is devastating. We are all hurting incredibly.
Within minutes, hundreds of rescuers descended on the river, risking their own lives in the freezing water. They located the fuselage, split into 3 separate parts, along with the wreckage of the helicopter. Hope of finding survivors gave way to grim reality.
Despite all those efforts, we are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident.
Bodies of the victims were transported to a makeshift morgue on Washington's waterfront as investigators begin to probe why the aircraft collided in the tightly controlled airspace.
This was not unusual with military aircraft flying the river and aircraft landing at DCA.
Clues may lie in the flight data recorders. The Pentagon says the Army helicopter was on a routine training flight with an experienced crew.
The military does dangerous things. It does routine things on the regular basis. Tragically, last night, a mistake was made.
With the wreckage still in the water, investigators caution answers to this tragedy will take time.
Now, we will not be determining the probable cause of the accident while we are here on scene, nor will we speculate about what may have caused this accident.
The National Transportation Safety Board says the first preliminary report will be due within 30 days. And because the aircraft involved was built in Canada, Canada's Transportation Board says it's also sending 2 representatives here to Washington to take part in the investigation.
And Jackson, the NTSB made it clear their investigation is just beginning. They don't have enough information to reach any conclusion on the cause. But President Trump did go ahead and speculate anyway without any evidence.
That's right, Donna. He wasted no time in trying to capitalize politically on this tragedy today, attempting to blame it on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. There's no evidence of that, but he turned quickly from mourning to the blame game. Take a listen.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out
how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. We want brilliant people doing this. This is a major chess game at the highest level.
The bigger political issue may in fact be air traffic here at Reagan National Airport. Just last year, they opened up more slots for more flights, despite warnings that the airspace is already dangerously crowded. Yet, Donna, they're pushing ahead with those new flights and routes starting here in March.
Okay, Jackson Proskow at Reagan National Airport, thanks. The National Transportation Safety Board ducked questions about Trump's comments and said they are focused on uncovering the facts. We do know the air corridor leading to Reagan Airport is extremely busy, as Jackson said, and according to the FAA, there were at least 8 near misses at Reagan National Airport in 2024 alone. Eric Sorensen is looking into what we know about events that unfolded last night.
It's probably the most closely monitored, complex airspace in the world, with commercial, business, and government air travel, plus military flights to maintain security in the heart of Washington, D.C. So how did meticulously choreographed flight paths result in catastrophe?
We will look at all the humans that were involved in this accident. Again, we will look at the aircraft, we will look at the helicopter, we will look at the environment in which they were operating in.
The passenger jet's flight path was changed from the main runway to runway 33, but that was nothing unusual. The helicopter was maneuvering, but that was also deemed normal.
And at this time, we don't know why the military aircraft came into the path of the PSA aircraft.
Both flights were on standard flight patterns, according to the Transportation Secretary. The American Airlines jet was on the expected descent to land on runway 33. The Army Black Hawk helicopter was on a routine training flight. The third player is air traffic control. Talking to each aircraft, the plane and the helicopter don't communicate with each other directly. Shortly before the crash, the tower contacts the helicopter. The tower asks if the helicopter sees the regional jet. Then the tower tells the chopper to pass behind it. The helicopter did answer that it had the passenger plane in sight. It was instructed to maintain visual separation, but did it? Because 13 seconds later, the two aircraft collided. A key question for investigators: how did a highly advanced, responsive helicopter not realize what was about to happen?
They had to have visual of the aircraft and take necessary flight action to avoid being in the path of that commercial airplane. And that did not happen.
Was the helicopter pilot looking at another aircraft taking off, or distracted in this urban airspace?
There's lights everywhere. And having flown many times in the cockpit of aircraft, at night time, it is exceedingly difficult to pick up another aircraft at night.
There will also be questions for air traffic control. Could the tower have done more to avert the two aircraft intersecting? Was staffing appropriate? A preliminary report says the air traffic controller was working 2 positions at the time of the crash. But in such crucial airspace, experts for now are mystified that this disaster occurred.
There was really no attempt on either aircraft to avoid a collision.
And the question is why? Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
We need you, Lord, right now.
In the city where the plane took off, Wichita, Kansas, there was a prayer service for the victims today. Interfaith leaders united to reflect on the power of community to try to comfort those who are grieving. The plane was carrying figure skaters who had just competed in a championship in Kansas, among them a number of young Americans and their parents and coaches, and 2 world-class Russian skaters who worked as coaches in the U.S. Figure skating is a tight-knit community, and as Heather Yurix West reports, this loss has hit hard.
An up-and-coming talent, Gina Hahn spent much of her young life on the ice, working towards some big goals.
I mean, for me to watch her start out as this spindly little kid and then to grow into this mature 13-year-old who just looks so beautiful on the ice, and her technique and her triple jumps, and a fierce competitor.
Hahn and her mother were among 6 members of the Boston Skating Club who died Wednesday. Killed alongside fellow skater Spencer Lane, who had posted from the plane on Instagram just before takeoff. 16, Lane was considered a phenom in the sport, expected to go far. He died with his mother Christine, who is being remembered by her husband as incredibly kind.
The amount of people from the community in Rhode Island I've already heard from today that she's touched, whether it was like, screening them to adopt the dog that they love, or whether it was like, helping them, with a sewing project.
Coaches Vadim Naumov and Yevgenia Shishkova also died. World champion skaters from Russia, the pair competed in 2 Olympic Games. In rinks across Canada, news of the tragedy has hit the tight-knit competitive skating community hard.
All of our skaters here across our country and every country travel together, for a lot of the time. So having that reality hit home, it just hits you square in the stomach.
When you find out, some of the people on the plane is even a bigger blow.
U.S. figure skating icon Nancy Kerrigan also among those grieving.
We just wish them well, and the families, the courage and the strength to make the next steps. I don't know how.
Young lives ended far too soon. Heather Yurex-West, Global News, Calgary.
Now to President Trump's looming tariff threat. He talked about it again today, musing that it could still happen on February 1st, but that Canadian oil might be exempt. He is certainly keeping Canadians and Mexicans guessing, and that seems to be his strategy. It is stoking fears of an all-out trade war. Mackenzie Gray reports on the calls to pass legislation to protect Canadian workers and businesses.
Particular position.
The tariffs are about to arrive.
It's coming on the 1st, Saturday.
Donald Trump reiterating that a 25% tariff will be slapped on Canada and Mexico this weekend, but that might not be the end of them.
We will really have to do that because we have very big deficits with those countries. Those tariffs may or may not rise with time.
But there could be a carve-out for a key Canadian industry.
We're going to make that determination probably tonight on oil. Yeah, because they send us oil, we'll see. It depends on what the price is.
The price of Canadian oil is not set by the government, but on world markets, and the U.S. is our largest buyer, purchasing at a discount compared to other types of oil.
Everybody needs to take a deep breath. This is going to be a bit of a bumpy ride for a while.
And that includes at home, with the Natural Resources Minister worried about the domestic dynamics.
It's not a good thing for Canada if oil and gas is not tariffed, but that the auto sector is. At the end of the day, we are all Canadians. We need to be concerned about industries across the country.
If there is a tariff on Canadian crude, TD Bank estimates U.S. gas prices could jump up to 70 cents a gallon.
There cannot be tariffs without consequences. There cannot be tariff without impact, and there cannot be tariffs without higher prices for U.S. consumers.
The NDP calling for a tariff relief package.
Bring Parliament back. Let's pass legislation that supports workers.
Singh now willing to support the Liberals after saying just 2 days ago he'd force an election immediately.
Mr. Singh.
Mr. Singh. But now he's backtracking. Any tariff bill would be a confidence vote that if the Liberals lost would bring down the government. But the NDP leader is still promising to do that soon.
We're going to have an election in the spring. Nothing changes around that. We are going to be voting down the government in March.
When Trump reiterated that tariffs are coming, the Canadian dollar took a nosedive, Donna, dropping to 68 cents, its lowest level in over 5 years.
Mackenzie, thanks. Improving border security is one of Trump's demands, and Canadian officials are scrambling to meet it. The RCMP has chartered 2 Black Hawk helicopters and is using drones to patrol part of the U.S.-Canada border. With an undefended border as long as ours, it may just be window dressing. Braden Jager-Haynes reports.
Off the ground in seconds, with tactical teams en route in minutes. These 2 new Black Hawk helicopters are the latest show of force when it comes to Canada's border security.
The RCMP is in a more robust posture to secure the longest land border in the world.
Flying at speeds of up to 300 kilometers an hour, the military-style choppers will be used in targeted operations, intervening in high-risk situations such as human trafficking and drug smuggling operations.
Let's say there was an intervention half an hour away in vehicle, well, maybe we'll get there in 5 minutes with the Blackhawks.
In Alberta, local ranchers who have reported multiple illegal crossings on their land say the Blackhawks flying overhead is a welcome sight.
Our government is finally doing their part. This is something that has been lax and should have been taken care of a long time ago.
Along with the helicopters, the RCMP has acquired new technology, such as drones and surveillance towers. All measures implemented in swift reaction to the threat of crippling U.S. tariffs. With $1.3 billion in added border security measures, The federal government hopes it's enough to swing the Trump administration's decision come Saturday.
Show us the respect, shut your border, and end fentanyl coming into this country. As far as I know, they are acting swiftly, and if they execute it, there will be no tariff.
Last year, U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents seized less than 20 kilograms of fentanyl at the Canadian border, compared to more than 9,000 kilograms at the border with Mexico.
In the last 12 months, for Quebec only, there hasn't been a single occurrence of that we have detected of fentanyl going to the American market.
While imposing, the helicopters are currently a short-term solution. It's unclear what the RCMP plans to do once the lease is up come March 31st. Braden Jagger-Haynes, Global News, Montreal.
Another release of Israeli hostages from Gaza coming up, why Israel's prime minister was so angry about how it happened. Another group of hostages has been released from captivity in Gaza in return for the release of Palestinian prisoners and detainees. It is the third exchange to take place, part of the conditions of the ceasefire, but it has not eased tensions. As Vincent McAviney reports, frustrations over how chaotic the handover of the hostages was today highlights how fragile a ceasefire is.
Almost 16 months after she was taken hostage, 20-year-old Israeli soldier Agam Berger was forced onto a stage by Hamas fighters, armed not only with guns, but with cameras and drones to capture the moment for propaganda. Nevertheless, her friends and family celebrated finally seeing her alive. And safely back in Israel, the emotion of the moment was etched on her parents' faces. Two more Israelis were released, 29-year-old soldier Arbel Yehud and the oldest hostage, 80-year-old Gadi Moses. But the chaotic scenes of crushing crowds infuriated Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu so much that he delayed releasing over 100 Palestinian prisoners for several hours. We do not intend to accept any risk to our hostages. Whoever dares to harm our hostages will pay the price. All 3 Israelis and 5 Thai agricultural workers also captured on October 7th and now being treated in hospital. This was the moment one of the workers' mothers found out her son was still alive. As Israelis celebrated the news, Palestinians waited for their homecoming. In the evening, buses carrying 110 freed prisoners made their way to the West Bank and Gaza. At one point, Israeli security forces accompanying a bus came under attack from Palestinians. When they did reach their destination, the prisoners were welcomed by large crowds despite warnings from Israel against celebrations. With 4 weeks left in this phase of the ceasefire, the families of the remaining hostages will be hoping the deal holds despite the tensions. Vincent McAviney, Global News, London.
Police in Sweden have arrested 5 people after an outspoken critic of Islam was shot and killed. Salwan Momaka, a refugee from Iraq, was shot at an apartment building hours before a verdict was due in his trial over the burning of Qurans. He had desecrated several copies of the Muslim holy book in public, arguing his protests targeted the religion of Islam, not Muslim people. Swedish police allowed his demonstrations, citing freedom of speech, but also filed charges against him and another protester for incitement to hatred. Huge haul ahead, the complicated donation from a fish farm to a food bank.
Three, two, one.
The 2 NASA astronauts stuck on the International Space Station conducted their first spacewalk together today. In June, they went up in Boeing's Starliner for a trip that was only supposed to last a week. But because of problems with the Starliner, NASA decided it was not safe for the astronauts to use it on their return flight. So they're not expected to be back on Earth before March. A salmon farm in New York faced a dilemma when it decided to close down earlier this month. What to do with the more than 18,000 kilograms of coho salmon? It decided to donate them to a local food bank, but that offer came with a huge catch. The salmon were still swimming. The food bank scrambled to find volunteers and fished out around 13,000 salmon from the farm's tanks. And they had a tight timeline.
We didn't want it to go to waste, go into a dumpster or something like that, when it's great to eat, right?
The fact that we only had weeks to execute this really ratcheted up the intensity and the anxiety a little bit.
The food bank pulled it off thanks to all those volunteers and their nets, and the fish will be filleted and frozen before being donated to more than 240 pantries in the food bank's network. Songs from the heart, some of Canada's best, among those raising funds for the LA fire victims. That's next. Some of the biggest names in music are taking to the stage in Los Angeles tonight to raise funds for wildfire relief. Calgary's Tate McRae is among those performing. She'll be joined by fellow Canadians Alanis Morissette and Joni Mitchell. Other headliners include Billie Eilish, Lady Gaga, Stevie Wonder, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. The concert will be held at 2 venues and can be streamed online starting at 6 p.m. Pacific. Legendary English singer, songwriter, and actress Marianne Faithfull, who was at the epicenter of the British invasion in the 1960s, has died. Her album, Broken English, came out in 1979 and earned her a Grammy nomination. It was a second act in her career. Faithfull had battled heroin addiction and she'd lived on the streets in London. She rose to fame throughout the 1960s because of her music and her acting in films such as The Girl on a Motorcycle. She also had a highly publicized romance with Mick Jagger. Marianne Faithfull was 78 years old. That's Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Calgary's Peace Bridge. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.